But without further ado, I would like to introduce Elizabeth and Kamran.
Hi, hi everyone. I'm Kamran Afary. My name is Kamran Afary. My pronouns are he, they. I'm calling from Los Angeles. I live about 2 blocks away from the remnants of a Tongva village that's built around a still bubbling water spring located on the campus of University High in West Los Angeles. I identify as Iranian American. I'm queer. I teach communication studies at Cal State LA. I've been teaching at Lancaster Prison in particular since 2017 with 2 cohorts of nearly 50 students who are working towards their bachelor's degree in communication studies. It's been a life-transforming experience for me, working closely with a group of people over a long period of time and seeing their growth and development and their transformation as well too. I've taught courses in interpersonal communication and health communication, performance and social change. I'm also a drama therapist. So as a drama therapist, I use what's called a Narradrama approach, and we'll be discussing that today in all of my work. I do training workshops for prison educators, in particular, how to develop a trauma-informed community of practice. So we'll have a few more things to say, but I'll turn it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Kamran. So my name is Elizabeth Malone Alteet, and I'm a registered drama therapist. I am located in Orange County, California, on the traditional territory of the Tongva and Ashiman peoples. And my pronouns are she, hers. And yeah, so as a drama therapist, I started out actually as an actor, director, trained in New York City, and found my way to drama therapy through teaching and realizing that I loved working with people who are not really necessarily seeking to be actors. So I started working in spaces with teens who were having mental health challenges, children in educational settings, and found my way into carceral settings. And a light bulb just went off for me. Partially because I had done quite a bit of work in Palestine and ended up very close to the Palestinian community in my family, married a Palestinian. And so that became very dear to my heart. And I have been working inside carceral settings in prisons and jails, and recently juvenile hall, and also with children who have been impacted by incarceration for about 5 years now, with several different theater companies that have gone on inside as teaching artists, also with Santiago Canyon College as an educator, and most recently with Project Kinship here in Orange County. Currently leading some virtual, but we do get to go in person next week, workshops with youth and juvenile hall. And I feel very humbled to be here today and thankful. And I've been working with Kamran, Dr. Afary, for a few years now. We initially met at the Drama Therapy Institute of Los Angeles, and then we're working on different yards in the prison in Lancaster here in Los Angeles County. And we started working together using this, what you're going to learn today about, in a nutshell, the Narradrama framework from narrative therapy. And so I hope today these concepts that you'll take from drama therapy and Narradrama you can use in your work, because they really do transfer over to all kind of artistic mediums. So with that, we will go into a very quick warm up. If people are comfortable turning on their camera, because this is more of theatrical interactive. If not, we can totally make it work. But if you're here and you want to turn on your camera, we can do that, or we can just use our voices if that's easier. So we'll just give it a second to see. No pressure. Great. So our warm up today is going to be super fast because we have such little time. Kamran and I actually taught a course on this that was like 8 hours a couple weeks ago. So like, how do we get these concepts in a very short time? But we do want to just do something to kind of bring us into the room, get us into a kind of theatrical, playful place. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just offer a very quick, most of you, if you've done any type of theater work, are familiar with this very quick, easy warm up. I'm going to give a movement and sound, and you're all going to repeat it. If you're not on camera, you can just repeat the sound. So you will unmute yourself, and we'll just have all these funny sounds going. So again, I'll give just any sort of gesture and sound. If you wanted to reflect how you're feeling right now, that would be an added bonus. I'll do that. And you guys then repeat it back to me, and then I'll call someone's name. I'll just go from my screen. And then you do a movement and sound, the person's name I call, and then you give it to you throw it to someone else. So mine is, everyone can repeat that. And all right, I'm gonna pass it to Wayne.
I'm gonna pass it to Susie.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll pass it to let's see, Katie.
I'll pass it to Wendy.
I'll pass it to Kiana.
Oh.
I'll pass it to Carrie.
Yeah.
I'll pass it to Cleary.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'll pass it to Arnaldo.
And I'll pass it to Alden.
Woo!
Woo! And I'll pass it to Kate.
Ooh. I just jumped on late. I don't know who else hasn't gone yet. Somebody
I think
popped in.
I'm the only one who hasn't gone yet.
Please go.
Is anyone else? Oh, yeah. Okay. And I will pass. I think, was there anyone else that hasn't gone yet?
We have two people that might want to offer a sound, possibly. I don't know if Alexa or Daniel want to offer just a sound of how you're feeling right now.
Just unmute yourself.
If not, that's okay. We'll give you a second.
I'm waking up.
Oh, nice. Beautiful.
I will pass it to Arnaldo, was it? I'm sorry, I'm on the road.
I'll pass it back to Kamran or Elizabeth. I already went.
Yes.
All right.
We're good.
Cameron.
Yeah, I think we'll continue from there, Kamran.
Awesome. Thank you all. That was one of the ways in which we, create a sense of attunement to each other. It's a sort of a trauma-informed approach where you want to create a community, help people be together. And there's one way they can, come out of their being either triggered or, being, feeling alienated or feeling distant. So it's just the warm-up itself. It also has some really interesting trauma-informed consequences and theoretical ramifications that we do in the work that we do in our training as well, making sure that there's a sense of creating a safe space and a sense of attunement and a sense of working together, people feeling connected with each other as well. The two terms that we use, the two key terms that we're using today are intersectional and reauthoring. Intersectionality is an entire body of ideas that were developed by Kimberly Crenshaw over a period of years, and it's a very important part of critical race theory, important part of the movement that led to the rethinking of prisons and the abolition movement. So intersectionality, in terms of just having a sense of identities, is really important. And oftentimes intersection, the way it's defined, it doesn't really match the original intentions of Kimberly Crenshaw's work. So we'd like to talk a little bit about that. And then reauthoring has to do with this notion within drama therapy, the work of Michael White and David Epstein. It's also sort of a global movement of narrative therapists. It's a postmodern approach. It's very unpathologizing or depathologizing. It's a way of, asking questions, moving away from expert language, helping people reauthor, have a sense of agency in terms of reauthoring their own life stories instead of being told, what those stories are as well. So those are two very key concepts that we're going to go into and develop more. I'm going to start my screen share, and I would like to just also begin with just a quick discussion about limitations and risk. Elizabeth, would you like to mention something about this?
Yes, yes. So as Kamran is screen sharing, so particularly in the therapeutic world, we talk about this a lot, coming from teaching artists and drama therapy, kind of seeing a little bit of what I've experienced. But one thing as you do the work you do and incorporating the work of today is really thinking about what might happen if the group or someone in the group is flooded with emotion. So always offering different options. So if you're noticing someone may be reticent to participate, just being really attuned to the room and aware of things that might trigger, not that triggers are a bad thing, but that we're keeping safety in the room. So those warm-ups really help, I think, bring safety into the room. And usually, as you guys know, we spend quite a bit of time warming up in our sessions. And then there's a concept in drama therapy, which you can also take, called de-rolling. And so after today, you'll see we're going to do some mask work, making sure that we have a closure at the end. It could be through poetry or movement or sound, and really allowing them to kind of let go of the work, and so they can transition into a new space. So having some things in your back pocket, breath exercises, being able to transition quickly. One thing I often say, particularly when I was working in clinical work, you want to push your comfort zone, but keep yourself safe. And always saying, like, you can pass. If you need to pass today, you pass, but explaining kind of what that means so that people do push their comfort zones, but also that it might be a day where their comfort zone might just be speaking, or writing something. That's about all they can do. And by working that way, you'll really see people flourish and step by step get to where they need to go. And as you guys know, there's always site-specific limitations working inside carceral facilities, especially with personal work, personal theatrical therapeutic work, over familiarity, really walking that line of asking for vulnerability, being vulnerable yourself, but also maintaining that therapeutic kind of distance. And being aware of vicarious trauma and taking care of yourself. I know oftentimes my drive back from the work in a prison or carceral setting is a time where I kind of process, or I talk on the phone to someone, but just all that we're taking in, that we have ways of taking care of ourselves so that we can continue the work and we don't put our stuff onto the people that we are working with. And so that's just, a little bit about just always taking into account in your work, in your companies, the limitations and risks that are involved in what you're doing.
Thank you so much. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of some of the work that we do, again, about intersectional identities in our encounters. This is, again, something that sometimes we do an 8-hour entire full day but I just want to give you a little sense of it. A heads up, at the end of the session today, the last 20 minutes or so, we're going to do a exercise and ask you to create a mask. So please make sure that you have some drawing material, a piece of paper, maybe a paper plate would be great, but also maybe some color pencils. If you have any acrylic markers, or something that you can draw with, that would be great as well. So why should we attend to intersectionality? This came up to me in particular as I was trying to apply for American Psychological Association to offer continuing education credits for therapists. And one of their educators offered this new document that was just put out in 2017 by APA, the importance of attending to intersectional identities. I also was hired actually to teach intersectionality in my job. So the last 3 or 4 years of my life, I've been really immersed in this concept, and I've been doing a lot of work around it. As I mentioned earlier, intersectionality came out of the work of Kimberly Crenshaw. The focus of intersectionality, before intersectionality, a lot of the focus on identity was on looking at sameness, and also identities were also seen as something that's fixed, that's unidimensional, that's essential. And so that was the model of identity that a lot of people worked with. But with Kimberly Crenshaw, who was a legal scholar, what she was looking at was really these margins, at the margins of identity, identities that are silenced, that are erased. In particular, I mean, she was giving the case of a person who brought a suit in the courts for bias, and she was a Black woman. And the court told her that you can either bring a suit based on race discrimination, or you can bring a suit based on sex discrimination. But you can't bring a suit that charges both sex and race discrimination. But she was saying, look, this company that I work with, they hire African Americans on the assembly line, and they hire women in the office. So they're not, quote unquote, discriminating in particular. They do hire both. But when it comes to a Black woman, then there is a form of discrimination that's not covered by the legal the books that we have. So that's where she brought up this question of there's these intersections where two parts of your identity come together that are silenced, erased. They're not recognized. Society doesn't recognize them. Laws don't recognize them. Customs don't recognize them. And so what we need to do is to attend to those identities. And so there's sociological identities, there's neurobiological identities, people who are neurodivergent, there's class, there's race, there's gender. And how do we help people that we work with to become more aware of those moments, and then to be able to express it, to be able to give some voice to it? And of course, identities are also developing in the context of larger sociological, cultural, economic, what we call ecological aspects. So we want to also look at the larger pictures. What is the family structures like? What is the institutional structure? What is the laws of the city, the laws of the state, etc.? And so attending to intersectional identities means attending to silence, erased voices that are positioned in these structures of inequality. That's why addressing structural issues is very much part of addressing identity issues as well. So an example would be a Black American lesbian woman. Now, some of those identities are, they may have some privileges with them. Other parts may have some oppressions that are associated with them. So we also have to look at the uniqueness of a person. So a person can actually have certain aspects of their identity that's a privileged identity, and they don't really question it, they don't raise assumptions about it, and other aspects that are oppressed that needs to be addressed. as well too. In the prison, I know with our own work, we've come across the incarcerated students that I work with who have a mixture of different intersectional identities. One of my students who also created this magnificent bead. I think there's something like 5,000 different beads in here. Is an activist who brought a lawsuit. He's a Native American. Brought a lawsuit against the state of California in the 1990s to fight against fight for religious freedoms, to bring a sweat lodge into the prison. So he's someone who's a civil rights activist. He's a human rights activist. He's someone who has a whole history of fighting for the civil rights of prisoners. He was in fact recently transferred from the prison, taken to a different place. But this is like part of his identity that we needed to make sure that gets developed, that gets expressed, that gets brought out in the process of working together. We have a student who was a male youth with a eating disorder, and just being able to express that in the midst of the class, when eating disorders are often associated with younger women in particular, to be able to find a space. And Elizabeth was the one who was able to actually connect with that part of him and allow him to express it in some of his writings and to develop it into a performance. We have a same-sex couple who have been living together in the prison, but there's no way you could express that openly. But there's ways in which they find ways in which they can assert their right to have that identity as being part of a same-sex couple in the prison. We have an African-American student who comes from a very highly educated family of chairs of Pan-African studies departments, etc. But that part of his background as someone who has a deep academic knowledge and grounding and appreciation for the work that he himself was doing with the others had to be, again, something that needed to be expressed more fully and brought out. One story that I have about that is, the guys getting together in the yard and talking about their research papers, and new prisoners coming in and listening in and hearing that these older OGs are discussing their next communication research paper, and what an effect that has also in the prison yard as well too, on the others as well too. So again, very quickly, it's very important to pay attention to those marginalized identities, to help people to also get a sense of their own working on those identities as a social justice advocacy for self and for others. Some of our students, when we were working with them on a performance where they were putting together a history of their educational experiences, the traumas that they went through in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, and then coming to the prison, and then now being in this program where they were developing themselves as communication scholars. And we found out in the process, they decided they were going to use the term Ubuntu. They called themselves the Ubuntu Ensemble, which is a social justice, restorative justice, a historical movement in South Africa in the aftermath of apartheid. That was something they decided they wanted to take on, that identity. So in the future, when people came to visit with them, or reporters wanted to talk to them, or the trustees from the university, they would say, like, we're going to have a performance for you before we sit down and talk. We want to give you a sense of this work that we're doing on ourselves as well. So again, it's really important to address those intersections. Otherwise, what we do is we leave patriarchal relationships, cisgender norms, heteronormativity, all of that just as a given, as a silenced given. So how do we work on ways in which those can be discussed? This brings me to my last part of my discussion, which is this notion of attending to power dynamics. What I was discussing really was about attending to power dynamics. The important thing is that when we talk about power dynamics, we're talking about hegemony. We're talking about not so much the obvious, which is the horrible conditions of the prison with the brute force of the correctional officers and the visible hierarchy. And that's like, you know, we're not questioning that. That really needs to be addressed. But what happens is that it's an internalized, you know, acceptance of those norms. And that's where we're talking about, you know, power, attending to power dynamics, the psychological processes, the microaggressions that take place, and really helping, as we're working with our students, helping them to find their voice in responding to microaggressions, in responding to the constant way in which their identities are being silenced or erased. They're being called incorrigible. They're being called, you know, criminals, inmates, all the different ways in which their identities are constantly being fixed. And at the same time, you know, how they find ways in which they can address their own social justice way of addressing, you know, discussing subjugated knowledges, just creating coalitions among themselves to address these questions of power and privilege. So we do some of that through our performances. For example, we have a way that, you know, we have them write something during the pandemic. Even, you know, I had them write a script. They sent the script out. We had it enacted by some students, sent it back to them. They had it. They watched the videotape, and then they were able to address and direct and say, well, this is the way I want it to be represented. This is the way I want it to be. Maybe, you know, you should change this a little bit. So also, that's another aspect of the work that we do, is to have a full experience of performance. So, you know, find spaces where you can express those silenced identities, create performances based on that, become witness to that performance, watch it, and then be able to give feedback to develop your preferred identities and to be able to see that. So that's just a little bit, again, you know, only 10, 15 minutes of discussing something that we've done over a number of years. We have some links for you at the end of the session. We'll provide the links of all these videos and animation documentaries and writings and interviews that we did. We'll provide you all of that. There's hours and hours of very powerful material. And just one quick question before I end, is that most of this material is also very helpful to them, because when they write their letters for parole, when they try to develop a sense of their, you know, argue for being released, they need that kind of documentation to show how they're redeveloping their own identities. And it's really important to overcome some of the censorship that takes place in the prison as well. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth. And I'll let her share her screen.
Yes. All right. I want to see. Whoops. I would like to do this. Okay. All right. So now to the reauthoring part. So being really clear on intersectionality, and as we're walking into a space, that we are evaluating our own judgments of ourselves, of others, insecurities, identities, keeping a really curious and open mind. And this is where our work of narradrama and narrative therapy comes into play. So I'm hoping that some of the concepts today you can take and use in the type of work you do. So I'm going to spend only about 5 minutes on this, but we're going to give you lots of resources if you're interested, and some ways to follow up if it's even more interesting to you to continue learning about it. So probably a lot of us have been in therapy of some sort. The idea of narrative therapy is really focusing on that people are separate from their problems. Narrative meaning stories. So our lives are, we create meaning in our lives through stories. It's very the same as drama therapy, strengths and values oriented. And so as you maybe delve into these stories, you're pulling out strengths, you're pulling out values, you're pulling out, you know, things from the past that probably maybe you saw through like a problem or a negative view, and you're kind of also trying to refocus and see what can you pull from that. If you went through this challenge, what is it that you overcame in that challenge that now you can take that strength and value into your preferred future. Looking at rewriting the future, this is where theater can come in. So it reflects more of who you are. So even if I'm, in a place that I don't want to be, in a carceral setting, what is it? What is my preferred way of being in the world? Preferred way of interacting with others, with myself, moving toward that preferred identity, because all of us have parts of ourselves at different times that feel fixed or stuck. And so helping people through some of these exercises that we'll get to with Narradrama, kind of move out of that stuck place and go into a preferred place. I know just the little warm-up exercise we did today, part of my stuck identity is perfectionism. And so every time I bring myself to a space like this, I just have to talk myself through so much perfectionism. And that warm-up just kind of took me out of it. And I just saw all of you guys do something really silly, and it just helped me all, feel like I'm a human and I'm with humans. So this simple things like that can help us when we're in a room, kind of take us into a preferred space. There's a narrative therapist that Kamran interviewed and has a body of work, Julie Tilson, and they say curiosity is a practice. So to do curiosity, and I think this is, again, that actually takes us away from those fixed places of I am the teacher, I am the expert, I am supposed to impart this information. And actually, I'm here to be curious about myself, about others, and I'm going to step in with an open mind of curiosity in this work. And let go of that feeling that us as leaders or facilitators or teachers are the expert, because that's not really helping anyone anyway. And so we're co-researchers. Narrative therapy, drama therapy, Narradrama really sees our role as co-researchers. One aspect of narrative therapy that we're going to just touch on today is questions. It's actually a huge part of narrative therapy, is that the therapist asks a lot of questions, helping the person lead themselves to where they want to go. And so there's no pre-thought, today I have to get to this place with this person. It's more here are some questions I'm going to, ask, and in the moment they might change. And we'll see where this person gets to, we'll see where we go. And really the idea that people are experts in their own lives. We have clients, students, people are really the experts in their own lives. And continuing with that, I just click. Narrative therapy looks from a narrative story metaphor. So really some big takeaways from today is people are meaning makers. We are constantly making meanings of our lives. So trying to understand what is the meaning this person has wrapped around this story for themselves. So if it's a meaning that's not really serving them, how can we lead them to perhaps a meaning that helps them out? And we all have this, right? We've created meaning around relationships or stories or past failures or difficulties. And so what is the meaning that's really going to serve us for the preferred future that we want? The idea of narrative structure, there's so much on this in narrative therapy, but it's really looking at how a narrative or a story has an action. There's action in it. So our lives have plots, have action. It has a landscape, it has a setting. And so Michael White is someone that you could read more to look into what is the exact structure of narrative therapy, but really it's just the way in which a story is told in a book or a play. We're kind of guiding people through that same type of landscape. One idea that I love is this determinacy versus indeterminacy, and then indeterminacy within determinacy. So all of us are born in a certain place with a certain family, things we cannot change. They're determined for us, and we do focus a lot of that in social justice work too. The structures that are oppressive, the places that, it feels like we're stuck because it's put upon us. And all that is very true, and examining that is very important, and working to change those is very important. And then also looking at in this unique person's life, what has been indetermined? Where have they made choices that have served them really well, even maybe within something that didn't go the way they wanted? But what are some choices we can pull out, and some actions they took that have showed how unique they are in their circumstances, and just helping guide people to a place where they are embracing more of their unique identity, and so they can move forward more from their authentic self. All right, so that brings us to Narradrama. So we're really thinking of it as narrative therapy plus drama therapy. I like to just talk about drama therapy in a very simple way, kind of, healing psychology work coming together with theater type work. And theater can encompass so many things, right? There's writers, there's actors, there's stage managers, there's design. And so in drama therapy, what I really love about it is that we use all these different types of modalities, not just getting up and acting. So people have choices. So thinking of Narradrama as narrative therapy combined with action methods. So in typical narrative therapy session, you're not necessarily getting up and role playing. There might be some more expressive arts types things, but with drama therapy, we are asking people to use their physical bodies, and it's more action oriented. The idea of externalizing is what I talked about before, that people are separate from their problem. And so one example might be someone's having a challenge of anxiety. And so instead of, labeling themselves of I'm just anxious, right? Well, I have anxiety. So let's maybe put anxiety over here. Let's draw. What does anxiety look like? Let's talk to anxiety. Let's kind of understand what anxiety is doing for you and what it wants from you. And so kind of taking it, and in drama therapy, maybe putting it out into the world as a role and as its own identity, versus people feeling like they are the things that they struggle with. We'll use role play. Projective could be the use of puppets, mask work that we're doing today, anything where you're projecting a role or an idea onto with kids or adults. You can do sand play. And then psychodramatic really goes more into that really personal story realm. There's a whole type of drama therapy called psychodrama that people get very specific training for. But again, just encouraging personal agency. This person is the expert of their own life and they have a unique outcome. And that restoring of the past. So not making the past like Pollyanna. No one's out to say, oh, actually it was fine. That's like the worst thing we could do, right? But how do you look at the past? And this is something that's so hard for me personally. Sometimes, how do you look in the past and see the unique way in which you overcame those challenges versus maybe being stuck in all the stuff that keeps you down? And then in that unique way, how do I reshape the future that I want? So just a quick student testimonial that I thought was very specific to what we're talking today. This person shared, I never imagined how liberating it is to externalize my personal issues. I was able to go back and re-listen to some of the positive voices from my past that had been drowned by all the negative ones I remembered. To understand that as people, we have also changed into something truer to our capacity as human beings to be full of love, kindness, and compassion. So that idea, this person shared several stories from his past on stage, in a devised therapeutic theater setting that Kamran and I worked on. And for him to go back and look at it through this unique outcome lens was very empowering. So today we're going to do masks, but on this slide, you can see different things that types of interventions that you can work with. We also are all going to introduce you to narrative questioning. Sculpting in theater is simply creating a gesture or a body shape in space or a movement. That might be like, okay, I'm dealing with this power dynamic in my life, so I want to sculpt this power dynamic. Maybe I want to be a part of the sculpt, or maybe I want to direct it and kind of see from the outside what's going on in this power dynamic. Mapping new possibilities can look literally like using fabrics in the space of like, okay, here's a future that I'm thinking for myself. Here's this other one. Maybe if I travel in space through artwork I've created or objects that I have or fabrics, kind of talking through these different possibilities. Today, we're gonna, hopefully we get there, engage in a collaborative poem, but using people's photography or collage, that came up a bit when we were working in Lancaster Prison, people bringing photographs from their past to kind of help on this stage kind of tell their stories. That was very important. And drawing a symbolic map of remembering, again, creating artistic pieces that people use to help them work through the past. We're going to look today at mask work, and then most of us are familiar with the idea of monologues. So maybe you want to speak from a place of this new identity or this identity, this part of yourself that has been silenced or erased. And what would it say? So I think I will just sum up this slide for the sake of time, but really today we want to look at, I want you to think for yourself, the first thing that comes up or the second thing, just an aspect of your identity that has been silenced or erased, but can be recognized and nurtured. And this was a little bit hard for me. I am in so many ways such a privileged person. And then I thought, oh, I can't say that, I can't do that because that's too insignificant or silly. People deal with other bigger stuff. But I just want to encourage us all that we all have parts of ourselves that do feel silenced or erased. And it could have nothing to do with maybe the larger privilege that you have, but maybe within your family or within your community. I will give just a small example. Again, it's like one of those things where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have some judgment on it, but I have really benefited so much this year from reading about the highly sensitive personality. And it has just opened up so much of myself and what I struggle with in so many areas of my life. And yet I'm not really comfortable being like, well, I'm a highly sensitive person, telling everyone that, because I feel I'm probably still judging it, and I get afraid of judgment. But I imagine a world where that is like a common term or a common thing that people know about, and how much more comfortable I'd kind of feel because of the things that I deal with. And so it can be like that, or it can be something that does have to do with more societal oppression, an aspect that feels silenced or erased. So we are going to create a mask today from that place of, I'm going to, oh, sorry, I just want to look at the time. Okay, so we have 17 whole minutes. So Kamran, you can jump in, but I'm just going to show, I am like, I have very elementary visual art skills. So you could just take a piece of paper and create a circle. It doesn't even have to be a face. It could be, abstract. And if you have, I just have some colored pencils. If you just have, yes, there's Kamran's examples. And really, we're going to take 3 to 5 minutes. We're going to give you even less time. So if you're an artist, feel free to take this and run with it after the session. But just to give us a brief example of an exercise, because we want to make sure we get to that today. So if we want to take 3 to 5 minutes, and then we're going to put you in breakout rooms in groups of 2. It does
share with you we're going to share with you some narrative questions, and we want one person to put on the mask and the other person to ask those questions, and then go back and do the same thing with the other person. So we're going to pair you up to have a narrative conversation with your intersectional identity masks.
Exactly. So yeah, let's, if there are any questions, please share now. And then also there may be some people who can't do this because they're in the car, or it's just, they really aren't able to engage in this way. So perhaps you can put that in the chat, or just speak up like, hey, I'm going to be listening, but I can't actually do the mask, or go to a breakout room so that we know that. But for the rest of you, yeah, if you can take the next 3-ish minutes to just on a blank sheet of paper or a face that you've created, just reveal an aspect of your identity that feels silenced or erased. And then we'll guide you from there.
And it can be highly, highly symbolic. There's a lot of distancing that goes on in the drama therapy work it doesn't have to be literal or explicit. So you can play with colors, with shapes.
So maybe we'll come back at 12:35.
Yes.
Then you'll have very fast breakout rooms. We'll get there. Kamran, I sent you a message in the chat. Well, one more minute. I know it's an impossible task. We'll do our best.
So as you're wrapping up, we're just, we as drama therapists and theater artists and artists, we have to also learn how to improvise very quickly. And so we've decided we're actually going to combine the two exercises that we had separately. And because we don't really have enough time to go into breakout sessions, what we'd like to do, instead of going into breakout session, is to have a short discussion on the masks that we created, do a little bit of narrative questioning, and then do the next exercise, which Elizabeth will explain to you.
Yes, so I'm sorry, Cameron, you're asking me to talk about the poem or to go into the mask work?
I think we should go to the mask work and then go
Yeah.
to the poem
Great.
as well. Yeah.
So what we were going to do is have you go in breakout rooms of 2 and then take about 10 minutes, which we don't have. But this is, we want also for everyone to know the exercise, because as practitioners, it's also important, just like what is the exercise? And then you can go and use it or adapt it how you wish. So the person, a mask, this can work for so many different things. Right now, we asked you to create an intersectional identity mask. This can be, I've done an inside outside mask representing the inside of you, then the outside of you. Masks, you can project almost any idea onto, and you can have very simple materials. So I would love for a volunteer who you're just volunteering to show your mask and for us to ask you some questions about that identity mask. And these questions are in the style of narrative questioning. Susie, awesome. This is fun. Okay, so Susie, show us your mask and if it has a name in the moment, if you have a name for it. And just, here we go. And zoom out a little. Yeah, bring it closer to you a little bit. There we go. Ah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, wonderful.
Hold on. Can you hold it right there? And I'm going to see if I can pin you so everybody can see up closely. Yeah.
Oh, great idea.
Wow. Thank you.
And I often like to ask the person, well, I'm going to ask you these questions in first person as the mask, if you're comfortable, but what is your name?
White lady.
White
Should
lady.
I keep the mask up?
You have the
Sure.
option of keeping it up or putting it next to you, but we would like to see it, whatever is more comfortable. So white lady, can you describe the last time that you gave a voice to this aspect of this identity that may feel, you might have conflicting feelings about?
Or
one time?
One time we were doing a training with an artist from the University of San Francisco. She was doing an equity and inclusion training, and her perspective, she was white, and her perspective was that as a white person, she should not any longer be doing work in carceral settings where there were predominantly Black and Brown participants. She did not feel that she should do this work any longer. And I felt immediate conflicting feelings about this because as a white person, I felt, well, maybe she's right. I don't believe that she's right. And I still carry that angst with me that somehow this is not my place.
Okay, what stood really out to me is that last sentence about this, silenced part of you, being a white lady. This is not my place. And knowing you, I know how much you love the work and how dedicated you are to the work. And so having that voice, this is not my place, which might be actually another name for the mask, possibly. What is one feeling that came up for you, or one thing you noticed as you were sharing that memory to us?
I think the overarching feeling is fear. Fear and fear that as a white person, it's appropriate for me to step aside, to give space to others. And that makes me sad, and I understand it if it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And white lady, can you say, like, are there ways in which you you'd like to give yourself more of a voice that would be empowering and helpful to you rather than fearful? And what are some ways you can imagine giving yourself more of a voice that at the same time is, is empowering?
Well, when I think about the participants with whom we work, both inside and outside, the majority of whom are Black and Brown, and I hear their responses to the work that we do, I have to revisit a sense of correctness, that what I am doing is right, that I do have the right to do it. And I also remember one of the program directors from another arts and corrections organization who is Latina, who said, when I expressed this in a group that we had, she said, Black and Brown incarcerated people need to see positive white role models. They need to see people who are on their side, who are white. Don't stop doing what you're doing.
So that's a really important part of the work, is the witnessing that takes place. And you felt you were witnessed, and that people who knew you and knew of your work would be able to speak for you on your behalf as well too, to continue to express that part of yourself. Would you say that?
Yes. Awesome. And so I in order to move forward, I do go back to that recognition. And there still comes up in me times when I feel like I need to watch and listen more than I speak.
Well, thank you so much, White Lady. Yes, we only have 2 more minutes actually to get toward the end of the session. Really appreciate it.
Quickly say is that as a fellow white lady, I can resonate with that. And also what I heard you say, Susie, was that there was value in this other person deciding this for themselves in your life, because it actually has helped you to step back and see situations where maybe it would be more valuable, but it hasn't motivated you to make the same decision, because you've also looked at your purpose and what you want to do. So it's interesting that they both had value to you, not just negative. What we're going to do in the last 2 minutes, because I think it will be important for us to have a nice closure, is a collaborative poem in the chat, if you're able to type in the chat. And you are simply going to write, this is around your mask and your intersectional identity.
Just one sentence.
Yes, one sentence. When you share my story, say that I ... So one example for me might be, when you share my story, and this is around my highly sensitive thing I shared, when you share my story, say that I deeply care. So around your intersectional identity, in the chat, the first thing that comes up for you, when you share my story, say that I, and then we're going to read this as a group poem, as a closure for our work today. And you can just type it in and send it at random. We have about 30 more seconds. Great. I'm going to start reading them, and if you haven't typed yours in yet, we'll get to it as I finish reading. When you share my story, say that I honored those values that help me move away from oppressive norms. When you share my story, say that I deeply care. When you share my story, say that I am an artist with a passion for affecting change, that I listen deeply, that I resisted. When you share my story, say that I coped. When you share my story, always try to remember ways that you are hidden. Beautiful. So that's just an example of a closure, something you can work with the group, especially today, because not everyone got to share their mask. You can hold it up if you want at the very end. If not, that's okay too. But thank you so much for being here today.
So very quickly, Elizabeth and I will be teaching a day-long workshop on July 11th, that if you're interested, you can contact us and we'll give you more information on that. And we also have some links at the end of this PowerPoint, which we'll share with you, to the Prison BA journal, to the drama therapy collection of interviews online, as well as to the upcoming workshop as well. Thank you so much for all your participation.